Welcome back. This video will cover Learning Objective 2.3 for Chapter 2 in PSY 235 Social Psychology. In this part of the chapter, you'll be looking at the ways in which cross-cultural research and research coming from the relatively newer sub-area of social neuroscience have impacted how we understand social behavior, and how the open science movement has asked some really important questions about the limitations of research methods in psychology. So we'll start by looking at findings within social psychology that have been found to be dependent on the culture of origin of the person. We know that lots of findings in social psychology do vary significantly from one type of cultural context to another, depending on the values, beliefs, and historical experiences of the people who live in them. So we do cross-cultural research in order to test those problems. So cross-cultural research is going to be done to really ask the question, how does culture affect human social interactions, and how does it impact social influence? Researchers who engage in cross-cultural research really have to try and put their own viewpoints and biases and definitions that they've acquired from their own culture to the side, not ignoring it, because it's always going to be there. You can't be 100% objective because you're human. But you have to kind of put it in a box, put it to the side, and learn as much as you can about the culture you are studying. A lot of this research involves, taking a theory from your culture of origin that you've tested and you understand, and then taking it and testing it in another context to see if the same findings hold. As a cross-cultural researchers, you have to be sure that the variables that you're using, if you're doing experimental research or even correlational research, you have to really ensure that the variables are going to be perceived in the same way in other cultures. What we know from cross-cultural research is that some psychological phenomena do appear to be pretty universal. Others, not so much. So we do have to be critical of any kind of research findings that are strictly found within one cultural context but haven't been tested cross-culturally. If we take that finding and we say all humans are like this because I said so and because I found it in the United States, that really shouldn't hold a lot of water, because you need to test it in other cultural contexts to understand whether or not the finding is robust. Now, as I said before, social neuroscience is a comparatively newer area of study. And in this area of study, we're looking at the intersection of the biological processes that underlie human thinking, emotion, and behavior, and our understanding of human social behavior. So it's really applying neuroscience to social psychology. So there are some social psychologists who are pulling in neuroscience theory. There are some neuroscientists who are testing social psychological theories collaboratively. So in some cases, this can be as straightforward as looking at the impact of hormones on specific kinds of behaviors, looking at immune system variables, and other kinds of neurological brain processes. With new technologies, things like functional MRIs and EEGs, we can do a lot more now than we ever could in the past, especially with functional MRIs, where you can put people in an fMRI scanner and you can watch where the blood goes in the brain, and allow you to really kind of track what parts of the brain are activated under what kinds of circumstances, what kind of decision-making circumstances. The open science movement, also a relatively recent phenomenon, has really forced scientists generally, but social psychologists definitely have felt this movement pretty strongly, is to say, research practices need to be evaluated. They need to be understood more broadly. So what's been, and they need to be applied more broadly as well. So part of the movement has focused on making science, regardless of what type of science, more accessible to other scientists, but especially to the public. You know, science has tended to be pretty rarefied, where you have, you know, research journals that are not easily accessible to the general public. It wasn't until fairly recently that we had open access journals, meaning that anybody with a connection to the internet can access these high quality journals where research is published. In the past, unless you were a scientist and you had access to a university library, you were not getting your hands on peer-reviewed published science coming from scientists. It was fairly rarefied. And a lot of those publications, they were written for and designed for not a general public audience, but for other scientists in the same field. So part of the open science movement is to say, hey, science, you need to put this at a level where real people without your level of understanding and vocabulary are going to understand, because science should be for everybody. So researchers, when they can do so, when it's feasible, they need to provide access to materials that other researchers can use. I've definitely seen an uptick in the willingness of researchers to provide their methods in excruciating detail, or if they're using surveys, to actually provide the surveys so that we can see them and understand how data was collected. That means that, number one, you're sharing your materials so that other people can replicate your research. It also means that you're being truly transparent in how you came to the conclusions that you came to. So this movement has really raised some concerns because as people are more willing to share their methodologies really fully, it also means that you have to be open to having your work replicated. What happens if your findings can't be replicated? Well, then you have some real questions. Maybe there were problems in your own methodology, so you may need to run your own replication. Maybe there were problems in the replications themselves. Maybe there was a critical element that was tweaked or done differently, or maybe just the passage of time has made the finding no longer relevant. So that was a short part of the chapter. In the next video, we'll be talking about research ethics.